Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fiction genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Magicians as well as the latest episode of The 100. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of The Magicians, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of 100. But the first thing we're going to talk about is this week's episode of The Magicians. So let's focus on the fillery front at first, because basically everyone's trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to deal with this whole situation? War is coming, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, the sloth ends up bringing up the fact is that there is another option, and it's a one-on-one duel between the Lorien King and Eliot. But it's like, yeah, it's not highly recommended because it's like everyone the Lorien King has ever gone up against, like it's been 14 other duels, he has killed everyone. Which at first Eliot accepts it immediately because he's like, wait a minute. The fact is I'm the only one who's ever decided to, suggest a duel, volunteer for one. What would happen to me? Like, how would the people feel about me? It's like, oh, the fact is you'd be the first one to ever accept it or do one. It's like, people would love you. And then Margot's just like, oh, he's literally sitting there imagining all the statues being built in his honor. Because for one, it just helped the reputation of Fillory in general. But, he's trying to get ready for the battle, but he's never really fought much with a sword, and there's very few little magic that can help him in this situation, especially considering the fact that the wellspring situation keeps happening and magic starts dying out. But what I appreciate is Finn comes to him and she's like, okay, here's a sword crafted by my grandfather. There's even a spell written out. It's like, oh, he wrote it out in German. Yeah, my grandfather wrote it out because he had, just in case the High King was, he's like too lazy to read it. She's like, what? No, was too preoccupied with, State of the Union type of situation, dealing with the kingdom. So, but what I love about the Fillory storyline even more is the fact is it turned into a musical. I love it. Literally the second musical this week. Obviously the first being the Supergirl and Flash crossover musical that literally aired yesterday. And I get it this time in this episode too. Margot put the whole thing together, got the entire kingdom singing and dancing, and I love it. And even Margot at one point said, okay, yeah, I had to skip a couple verses because it didn't pertain to our particular situation. And you have Eliot going, oh, okay. And then they're like walking onto the battlefield, everyone's cheering like, yeah, busting in a song. And then the Lorien King is like, oh, was the battle not today? He's like, dude, it's a metaphor. And so the battle goes underway. Obviously, like Eliot's kind of winning at first, but then magic kind of browns out and it kind of gets rid of his spell. But what I loved is like while Eliot's just hiding up in the tree, it's like part of me is like, why didn't Eliot strike when he had the chance? I guess it was, without his skill, with the sword, he kind of didn't, because basically the spell gives him the experience of all the other people who've wielded the blade before, like past warriors and fighters, swordsmen. And I guess it's a situation where it's like Eliot's not all that keen about killing people, because the last person he killed, like, canonically speaking, was Mike, I think. And so he's probably very reluctant to kill anyone. I mean, I don't think killing's just in his nature anyway. That was kind of a last resort type of situation, but maybe that plays a part in why he didn't kill the Lorien King when he had the chance, or maybe it's just kind of like, I don't know if I don't 100% trust myself. I mean, I felt like all he had to do was kind of thrust forward. He could have dealt with it, but he ran away and hit on top of a tree. And then the Lorien King is like swinging that, about to cut it down. And then they had this very candid conversation like, oh man, I know, like, if I didn't have to kill you, like, I wouldn't, because like this whole kingdom thing sucks. It's like all your people do is just complain. It's almost like they're never happy. He's like, I know, right? Oh, and then like the fact is almost referring, he's like, oh man, you're hot dilf. And he's like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be offended by that. He's like, hey, don't worry about it. Basically going back and forth and being like, yeah, you're pretty hot. And I hate the fact is that one of us is going to have to die because you're so attractive. And because it basically turns out that actually the Lorien King, it seems like he might have been in the same situation as Eliot, where he's gone like, I have to take a wife upon becoming king. And it's just like the candid conversation they were having. And he's like, oh, the fact is I do have a baby. That wouldn't have any effect on you not killing me, right? He's like, no, sorry. He's like, well, I have to try. And it's like, damn it. I'll get into the whole situation later on. I'll get to that situation in a second about how the whole fairy situation in Margot. But I love the fact is that, like, you have Eliot being like, you know what? The fact is there was a loophole in this whole situation that basically now he can actually, as part of this like marriage situation, he can actually have a husband and a wife. Because like even Marco's like, oh, well, what about the whole like wife and pregnancy thing? And then it's like, he's like, nope. here I am with the Lorien King, and it's just like, and it almost seemed very interesting because you have him in the center, and you have like, because in the background when he's talking to Margot, you see the Lorien King kind of talking to Finn and everything, and then like he holds on to Finn and he holds on to the Lorien King, and they kind of come together. It's like, oh, it's sweet and weird, but it's like, hey, I mean, it works. It's for the sake of the kingdoms bringing peace. I mean, the way Eliot spins it, he's like, yeah, this is also, you know, about espionage, because it's like, oh, welcoming him into your home at the same time. Well, I mean, I guess it's one way you could look at it. It's like Eliot getting what he also wants, because like this way he doesn't have to worry about making a clay version of himself to go off and, I mean, really, that wasn't the main purpose of that one, to go have sex. I mean, it happened, but that wasn't the main focus of it. I'm surprised that dude never came up again. I already forgot his name because he only popped up that one time when Eliot was having sex with Finn and Fillory, he was having sex with the Golem and on Earth. So, but the fact is that it's like, oh, offering like 50% in the wellspring, which got fixed because Margot made a deal with the fairies, which it was originally the sloth who was like, yeah, I love that sloth so much, because even Margot's like, all right, tell it to me straight. I know you're the only person that will tell me how it is without kissing my ass, because you're very upfront about things. But basically, the reason why the fairies are not an optimal solution is because they're very crafty. The fact is they have contracts that you kind of have to sign, but it's like, you never know. There might be loopholes, you know, extenuating circumstances. It's like they're very crafty about the contract. So it's like they're not really the first option you want to go to, but it's like they have the power to fix the spring well, but the wellspring, but it's like, don't really do this. But Margot, apparently the way she was saying, because it turns out that the fairy king, not the fairy king, the fairy representative saying like, oh, what we want is the baby inside of inside of Finn, and then like Margot's like, wait, what the fuck? And then that apparently offends the fairy, and so basically Margot's like, you're okay with me doing whatever as long as it means saving Eliot's life and fixing the wellspring. She's like, do whatever you need to. And then it seems like the deal is struck. Granted, it doesn't seem like it's necessarily an immediate thing, because the fact is, because Margot's at the position where it's like, you know, Eliot's like, okay, so how did you fix the wellspring? And then she kind of looks, and like the guy's gone. So I can only assume it's a situation where it's like, he's not going to come back until the baby's due. So now Margot's probably got to spend all this time trying to find a loophole around this situation. I mean, granted, who's to say what the fairies will do if she gets in their way? For one, it's the fact is that she promised a baby, but it's like, I mean, what? Because I mean, I'm sure she's very reluctant to say anything in the moment. So I'm wondering, is she going to keep it from Eliot and Finn? Because if she tells this, who's to say Eliot won't be? I mean, I honestly go, especially the way Eliot is now, because he even said something very interesting in this episode. He's like, forget about what happens to me if I lose this battle, like all of you are dead. It's like, no, he's putting other people first. So it's like, this is obviously, we've seen this is a very different Eliot. This isn't even Eliot that's like, oh, I'm here. You know, the Eliot before wanted a reason to die, but like, so no, he needs a reason to win, essentially. And it's like, that was very, like, it's just interesting seeing him being very different from the Eliot you saw in, like, the back half of season 1. But, nevertheless, I can only assume she's going to keep that secret, because it's like, Eliot will be pissed at her, and he may never forgive her. And then, like, you know, for Margot, that's, like, probably legitimately one of her few friends, like, you know, because we never really saw Margot ever really interact with everyone, because, like, Margot's kind of like Queen Bee, and it seemed like most people kind of avoided her. Like, the only other person we really constantly saw her hang out with is Eliot. And then, like, Penny, Katie, and Quentin, and Alice. Not really sure if you necessarily 100% count them as her friends. I think they're the closest things to friends that she has other than Eliot. So, and I think the same vice versa works for them, because they brought it up last episode. The Quentin's like, yeah, we may not be your friends, but we're the closest thing you've got to friends. So, that's where my brain is about that. So, I'm very interested about the whole aspect of, like, they wanting to take Finn's baby and make it, like, raise it as a fairy. It's like, why specifically that? Maybe it's because something special about the High King's baby or something. Like, why would you do that? I mean, I can only assume that's going to cause problems in the future. I mean, to kind of compare it to something else, it kind of reminds me of the situation in Once Upon a Time kind of right now, with, like, oh, the Black Fairy took Gideon and now he's back trying to live out his destiny, but you know, things aren't 100% as good as, he has his ideas of what things should be and the way they're going to work out, but everyone else is kind of like, it's not going to work out like that. So I'm wondering, is it going to be a similar situation or what? I'm very curious to see how it all works out, because if Margot does try to go back on the deal, I feel like I said, I don't think the Furies are going to take that lightly. So, but we will just have to wait and see how that all plays out. On the other side of the episode, I love the fact is that Quentin got locked up next to this dude. It's basically like lycanthropy. It's basically like a transmittable disease, because he's not even like a full werewolf. It's like he's like halfway transformed. Fact is, he's at one point pissing in a cell to kind of mark his territory. It's a disease, like I say, it's almost treated like an STI or something like that. And it's just like, and it literally is transmitted through sex. So it's like, that's so weird. Is that something like a full-on, is that what a full-on werewolf does to you if you have sex with them? It kind of passes it on to a certain extent like that. But they even brought up the fact is Henry is like, yeah, there is no cure for it. There's treatments, but no cure. Because obviously Quentin's situation is getting worse by the second. But obviously that kind of brings into the later parts of the episode. So I'll put that aside for a little bit and talk about. We ended up finding out who is quick side note, I kind of forgot to bring this up earlier because it's in the back of my mind. I kept wondering like why I recognized the actor who played the Lorien King. His name is Leonard Roberts. I know him as Dio from like Heroes. He was like one of the main characters in Hero. He mainly popped up in the first season, like one episode of the second season, if I'm remembering correctly. But obviously he's popped up in other stuff too. The thing is, I was confusing him with a different actor when I originally saw his name. It's not really important to know which actor I confused him with, but like when I saw his name, I confused him with someone else. So that was just kind of interesting. I was like, oh, that's you. Never mind. But, because I actually had to look it up because I was like, I knew him from something specific. I've seen him in a lot of different stuff, but it's like, I feel like there's something else like I'd seen him in, I just couldn't place it. And it turned out like Heroes was the thing I think I was thinking of. But getting back to it, obviously we see the continuation of the whole Julia situation. The fact is that she doesn't have her shade, because even Penny points it out. The fact is, it's like, you're not like telling Katie like you're the only one that refuses to see this for what it is, because at one point Katie's like, because Katie and Penny end up breaking Julia out of like that Fillory prison. I'm like, basically she's like, oh yeah, I killed all these trees. They're like, no, seriously, what'd you do? She's like, no, I killed trees that talk. It has Fillory has talking trees. It used to, and then she laughs about it. It's like, okay. And then later on, when they track down Reynard's son, who we end up finding out his name is John Gaines. He's actually running for senator, which I can't remember his name, but the actor who plays him, obviously I've seen him pop up in many different things. Obviously, probably the most recent thing he's ever done, I think, was Covert Affairs. I think that's the last thing I noticeably I know him from. He was like he played one of the main characters in that, but obviously, like I say, he's popped up in other stuff too. I feel like his name is something Graham. I don't know if that was his first name or his last name, but nevertheless, you have No Shade Julia being like, oh, the fact is, we don't need him alive. We could just kill him and put his essence and his magic inside of a container to hold it. Because, I thought it was kind of interesting how they're like, okay, we're not going to BS you. Here's magic. Boom, boom, boom. Magic is real. Trying to tell him who he is, which are also trying to hold back Julia from doing anything stupid. And obviously, John has a hard time believing everything, but then Katie kind of points it out. Has anything never not worked out in your life? And it's like, yeah, things might have taken a little while, but everything in his life has always worked out. And to the point that it's like, he's led a good life. And it's like, are you saying that everything that's ever happened to me is because of all this magic and stuff like that? It's like, it's not like you tried to do it. It's not like you killed your parents on purpose. It's just saying like life worked out that way for you, because how much money did you make upon your death? It's like you inherited like $20 million or something like that. So even with the bad stuff in life, there was always a silver lining to it, essentially, is kind of what Katie was trying to get across to him. And it seemed like it finally kind of sank into him. But Reynard was able to kind of tap into him. I wonder, is it specifically because that's his son, or was it just because it was like, Reynard can probably just do it to anyone? But he ended up getting past the school barrier mainly because the blackout that happened, obviously, in Fillory was happening there too. So Reynard got inside. I was wondering what Julia was going to do. I figured that's where it was going to go down to, because she had that whole conversation with Alice, and she throws Quentin in with Reynard, and it's like, okay, the fact is that I want you, Quentin, if you want to live, you're gonna have to get rid of Alice. You're gonna have to let her out, and then she can kill Reynard. And then the fact is that, set her free afterwards. Obviously this all comes down to her revenge. Granted, it's hard to really say is this even 100% about revenge. It's because she remembers what he did to her, but she doesn't. I mean, to be fair, even with the situation of Martin, even when Martin didn't have his shade anymore, Christopher Plummer was still held as his prisoner. So he, which we still don't know whatever happened to him after that. I guess it was a situation, maybe he's somewhere in those fillery prisons too, or maybe they just dealt with him. That was never really 100% dealt with. But nevertheless, Quentin still wouldn't let her out because it's like Quentin doesn't 100% trust her because he doesn't want to seal her up, but he can't 100% trust her if she's set free because it's like, as a Niffin, it's like, who's to say she won't just go on a killing spree because it's like she is pure magic. Maybe she'll go out hurt other magicians as a means of getting their magic. So he would, even then, given the opportunity, he still wouldn't let her out. And so you see Reynard using the spell. He's like, oh, I'm using the spell, same spell that your 10-fingered friend did, like the whole freezing people thing. Which I can't, well, obviously he ends up using, that's the second time he's ever used that, right? Because he used it on Reynard, obviously this season, but the last time he did it was like at the beginning when he ended up coming into the school and he ended up messing up Henry's hands and his eyes. So I'm thinking that that's the only other times we've ever really seen him use that spell, at least to our knowledge. But luckily, John came in time to kind of stop Reynard from doing what he did, and then he takes him away, which Katie got super pissed afterwards because, like, screw you, Julia. The fact of the matter is you were willing to do that to Quentin. You threw him to the wolves. It's like, well, Quentin's okay. It's like, that's not the point. The fact is you don't care anymore, and that's the problem. Like, it's like for her, it's like because she brings up the fact is that she made excuses because everything that Julia's been through, that maybe this is what Julia needed, in a sense. And that's kind of what Martin was kind of suggesting to get rid of her shade because it was what was holding her back. But the fact is that she just doesn't care about anyone. Like, all she cares about is for herself. Like I said, it's a situation where, like, even though it seems like she doesn't care, like, on the inside, it's still like she still has the memories of what Reynard did to her. So logically speaking, she still wants him dead. She just doesn't act on emotion. She's just like, I remember what you did to me. I want you dead for that. So she doesn't really feel remorse or fear or happiness or sadness, I guess, things that it seems like there's flickers of it at moments because she looks at Quentin later on when she saw him earlier, like when Alice was talking to her, she's like, he's bleeding. It's like, oh yeah, this idiot's dying. And it's like, you saw a look of concern on her face, but the most you ever see out of her is frustration, especially like after Reynard got away. Which there was something that kind of popped up in my mind. It's like, is it really a good idea to let John know exactly who or what he is? Because who's to say, like, even when it was all said and done and you got rid of Reynard, who's to say John doesn't tap into his magic and become a monster like his dad? I mean, it becomes that situation, nature versus nurture. Like, the fact is of who Reynard is, the monster he is, does it automatically make John predisposed to it? Maybe not, because John led a very different life. I mean, being the political man that he is, it kind of makes it seem like, no, he's a very trustworthy and good guy. I mean, he gets a lot. I mean, also the fact is he gets a lot of people to follow him, and maybe that's part of his magic and his charm as a demigod. So, granted, you can obviously see the backlash to that. That's why I'm like, maybe it'd be a situation where he gained his powers, and then he's like, you know what, screw that. I got all this magic. I get everyone to follow me. And the fact is that even Penny puts it is like, the fact is he has more magic than any magician in existence combined. So it's like, no one would ever really be able to stop him. But now that Reynard's got his teeth into him, maybe it's a situation where he warps his mind. So, I mean, the truth be told is, what is it that Reynard wants? Will John help him? Will he try to shift his son into being the monster, like trying to use his magic, be like, oh, you're my son, you should stop trying to be such a good guy, take what you want, you do have the magic, you have the power, I'm here to help you understand it and know it. I mean, because granted, John doesn't 100% know exactly who his dad is. He's like, oh, Reynard's like, oh, I wasn't trying to kill them, I was trying to stop them from killing you. So Reynard granted, he is a fox, so he's a trickster. I mean, to be fair, John is one too. He's half of one, so maybe he still holds a little bit of that trickster inside of him too. So maybe that'll be something that kind of helps him going forward. So, and then the final note about this episode is that we have Quentin finally letting Alice out. He ends up destroying the box and then setting her free. He's like, I hope that you keep the promise that all you're going to do is track down that Sir Friar guy and just try and work with him and just learn magic and be experienced with it. I mean, because granted, we don't know 100%, like, I don't think that dude actually did anything. He's just kind of been kicking back, enjoying his existence. I mean, he's never been, but the thing is, people spent so much time trying to cage him, it makes you wonder why were they trying to cage him. And now it's like, who's to say, like, especially now that Alice is with him, that she will just kind of keep to herself. Like I said, there's always a possibility that they'll try and attack other magicians trying to steal their magic and add it to their own, because it's like, oh, maybe on some primal level, that's all there is to a Nif, and that they can try and fight their instincts as much as they want to, but there's always going to be that part of them pulling towards that. Or maybe this guy might actually look at like Alice and like, oh, you're such an idiot. Now I'm going to take your powers. I draw in idiotic Nifins. I make them stronger, and then I take and absorb their essence. That's how I've been able to survive all this time. Might be something like that. It'd be kind of interesting if that turns out to be a case. So just a lot of very interesting developments, and I'm very interested to see where this all takes us going forward. So, and now moving on to this week's episode of The 100. So in this episode, we see that the acid rain has come, and things are not good. It basically, if people get exposed to enough of it, like mainly everyone kind of splashes water on them so they can stop the acid burns and keep it from spreading from the rest of their bodies. There's one, not some people weren't lucky enough. There's one guy that Harper feels the most bad about it is because like she kind of pushed a guy away because he was kind of reaching out for help, and she kind of pushed him away just because he was kind of pulling on her and kind of slowing her down. But then she turns around, everyone stampedes past him, nobody bothers helping him up, and so he got exposed to the rain even more. So she feels the most responsible for him. And Kane was like, the fact of the matter is there's a lot of people in critical condition, and it's like we have to kind of be more mindful to the people that have a better chance of surviving. In this particular guy's case, he wasn't. I mean, because when it came down to it, the people who actually came out to help him was Kane and Bellamy. So I guess for her, that it makes her feel even worse because she wasn't even there to go. One of the people who went back out to help him. But side note, there was kind of interesting there, like, oh, one of the people that was out is Jaha. I can only assume he must have found his way back to that facility because he must have, like, what that code is. Because it's like, we didn't see him throughout the episode, so I can only assume that's probably where he was. Because it had to be somewhere that kind of keeps him safe. I'm sure he, because obviously he was one of the people that was out during the time the Black Rain came. But nevertheless, I can only, like, especially because he dies at the end of the episode, and Kane ends up saying something interesting like, we're not always the people we want to be. And I guess it feels like it's a combination of many different things. It's like, for one, in her particular case, it's because like she wants to be the person that's always there looking out for everyone else. Because especially, she's one of the people that got in an uproar about, Clark making the decision of like who goes, and especially when it brings up like Clark brought up Harper's, like being predisposed to having specific illness because of her parents and stuff like that. And now it comes out that maybe, now it's a situation where it's like she wanted to be brave and help someone out, but it's like, she led a lot of people in. She's like, oh, come on. But when this guy needed her help, she wasn't there for him, which isn't her fault. I mean, like, no, it's a situation where everyone was panicking, It's like everyone's trying to get inside, try to scrub off as much of the acid and rain as they can. Coinciding with that is, like, Kane hasn't always been the person that he wanted to be, especially in this episode when, like, because Bellamy went out to track down some people that were still out there. I think it was at least 2 dudes. But obviously, like, the acid rain was coming and they didn't really have much protection. So he's trying to get there with the rover. But sadly, it gets stuck. And he's like, he can't get to him. And he's talking to him like Kane at the same time. But Kane's like, don't go out there. Especially here how hard the rain is going. All you're going to do is end up getting yourself killed. You won't do anything. All you can do is just tell them the truth. But he kind of tells them the truth, but he doesn't really elaborate. The guy's like, come on, I can run to you, but it's like the rain is pouring down so hard. Bellamy's like, you'll never make it. He's just like, all you got to do is stay hidden long enough for me to, wait for the rain to pass. I can get the rover unstuck and I can come for you. But sadly, when it was all said and done, he ended up dying. And for Bellamy, it's like, I couldn't save him. I can't save anyone. I can't even save my own sister. Because for him, for Bellamy, he's still in a situation of trying to redeem himself, not just to everyone else, but more particularly to himself, because he's looked down upon himself ever since he joined up with Pike and killed all those, everything he ever did when he joined up with Pike, because he was so angry, and he let his anger and Pike's words sway him. And it's like, he not only let himself down, but he let his sister down, because Octavia always looked up to him and respected him, but now she downright hates him. And it's like he's in that position where he thinks he'll never get her back. And now it's like, at least this way he could be like, I can do something. I can make up for what I did. This is kind of my way of showing like, no, I'm on the right path, that I can do the right thing, that there is redemption for him, because even he doesn't halfway believe there's redemption for himself. But the fact is he couldn't save them, can't even save his own sister. He just can't. He feels like he's worthless. But you have Kane being like, no, the fact is you can't save those who can't be saved. And it's saying like, the fact is you're doing the best you can in this particular situation. You did all you could. Because if Bellamy had gone out there without any protection, like he wouldn't have lasted long in the ring. It would have definitely killed him. So the fact is, you need to be around long enough to help other people. It's like, I get, it leaves you in a very conflicted situation because it's like, you understand why Bellamy feels the way he does. So, but Kane tries to ease his mind, be like, oh, the fact is your mom would be proud of the man that you've grown up. Because it's like I said, I've countlessly brought it up. Bellamy's a very different person than he was. Like, from the very beginning, the reason why Bellamy was here in the first place and doing what he did, taking control like that, kind of getting everyone riled up, is because he was covering his own, high, when it came to the whole, because he attempted to kill Jaha and stuff like that. So, but, Kane ends up saying like, oh, but your mom would be so proud of you like I am. But then he kind of throws it back into Kane's face. It's like, yeah, but you floated my mom. So it's a situation where, is he, like I brought up earlier, Kane is like the same way too. Like, even he isn't always the right person for the, like, even he can't really 100% be like, proud of who he's been. It's like, he can't always be the right person, because it's also, because it coincides with Abby's thing too, because Abby's like, is it okay? Does it make me a murderer if I'm hurting someone or killing someone if it means the sake of saving everyone else? Because basically there's a whole conversation of like, basically there's another way to deal with this whole situation. That's like, we can't use the zero gravity because there's not enough fuel for Raven to kind of go up into space with, to create the cure. But the fact is, they can use Luna's bone marrow and inject it and so on, but to do it, they have to test it out. So they have to expose someone to radiation and then test it out on someone. But it's like, the fact is, this could be a situation where I end up killing someone, and is that okay if it means, okay if it means saving everyone else? And then Kane's like, honestly, I don't know how to answer that, because him and himself in that situation, like I said, Kane wasn't always the person he is now either. The fact is that it comes down to it, like, do the ends justify the means? And I know I'm sure a lot of you are sick and tired of it, because I say that a lot, but it's like a lot of stuff kind of falls down to that. At the very least, I need to find a different wording for it, so instead of using those exact wordings, so I do apologize for that. But it's a situation where Kane is like, at this point, if it's for the sake of others and everyone else and survival, then it's okay. This is a moment you should cast aside your humanity. And when it's all said and done, when the whole solution is okay, everyone's been saved, then you can try to work to get your humanity back. But at the same time, it's like, getting humanity back isn't necessarily the easiest thing, because it's like, because once you go down that road, it's hard to pull yourself back from, because obviously, Emori overheard the entire conversation and was like, oh, they're going to do that to me, because, like, obviously I'm the one that's going to draw the short straw in this whole situation, being who I am. So basically, when the opportunity presented itself, because I thought it was kind of an interesting twist. I was like, oh, I thought this was like a whole setup and they were going to knock Clark out and get away. But it's like, no, Emori came up with a plan. She drew someone in. She made some guy think like, oh, you can come. She probably lied to him. It's like, oh, let's break into there. There's some food and stuff like that. And basically, it's like, oh, this guy, he's the one that did this stuff to me, and my brother. The fact is, kind of turning like Clark in particular onto her side, especially Murphy, because Murphy wasn't in on the con. But you find out later on that it was all a lie, because it's like, oh yeah, I wanted to make sure that it was someone else that's on that table. He's not the dude that hurt me. Obviously, what she probably told everyone was true, that the fact that she obviously cast aside as an infant, there's a guy that cut her and treated her like garbage and, hurt her brother as well, even probably outright killed him. But the fact is that it wasn't this particular guy. He was just a stand-in, which obviously Murphy kind of gave her kudos, being like, good job with it. Now that's all about surviving. So he's actually proud of her. I was like, oh, for a second you see him kind of appalled, but at the same time, it's like, oh, I'm just impressed that you came up with that, because her and Murphy kind of fit together in the sense of like, they're all about surviving. So, but granted, it's a situation where it's like, honestly, it's hard to say. I don't think Emori would have been, they would have tried to find someone else. I mean, because I'm sure like there would have been someone like, I mean, given enough time, Rowan or somebody could have found someone. I'm sure Clark might even suggested using herself. Maybe even Abby would have done the same thing. Emori thought like on the short end of the straw, she would have been the one, but it's like, she did this to this guy, made it seem like he was some kind of monster, but she played it well. So, but going back to it, it's just kind of like, Clark was trying to tell her, like, once you kill someone, it's not going to be that easy, to kind of come back from that, because it's like taking a life when you feel like you have no choice is what's going to hit you the hardest. She knows that because it's happened multiple times, especially happened with Mount Weather, because it's like all those people there she killed because she felt like she had no other choice, And it's kind of something that, Kane felt like, because it was kind of his duty at the time to do what he did. And now Abby's like having to sacrifice a life because it means saving not only her daughter, but everyone, herself, as well as everyone else. It's all about survival. So Because even Clark has to explain to her later on, she's like, no, Mom, I just need you to know this is okay. The fact of the matter is, I know this isn't the easiest thing. None of us is okay with this. But the fact of the matter is, it's as simple as that. We have to do what we have to do to survive. And I'm sure because for Abby, she's never killed someone before, like this entire series. Like she's always been the one against killing, but obviously she's defended herself, but she's never been in a position where she's had to kill someone. So obviously this weighs heavier on our conscience. But it's a situation where it's like, you need to do it because it's for the sake of survival, because you need to find out if this is a option or not. I mean, granted, because to me, I was also thinking, I guess it's a situation where it's like, if you can get enough of her bone marrow, then, because I was like, I feel like that's something that wouldn't be easily, like, I feel like you'd need a lot of her bone marrow. So I feel like you'd have to wait some time for her to heal and then like get some more. But I feel like that'd be very taxing and very painful for Luna. But I mean, granted, that does come down to whether or not this solution works. We won't really know until the next episode. But, I'm sure for Abby, it's a situation where it's like, because the fact is, it shouldn't be simple. Like, her taking a life shouldn't come easy. So I'm thinking, like, maybe in Abby's mind, she's like, I'll do this. But the fact of the matter is, you're saying it is simple. I don't like that. Maybe in her mind, it's like, because she's seen the fact is that Clark has done a lot of stuff, especially that whole situation where Lexa and Clark knew ahead of time that the attack was coming, but she got out. But when the conversation came up, Indra ended, because Octavia was super pissed when she found out about it. Indra was like, yeah, no duh. Like, the commander's life is more important. And so, that's a situation where it's like something that seems like, because just because something is a simple thing doesn't always mean that it's the right thing. It's kind of, I'm sure, mentality that Abby has. So it put her in a very compromising position, I'm sure, because it weighed so heavily on her. We did see a moment of her hands shaking, and I'm curious if it was about that, because I'm sure at that time, Clark had already told her about their idea and everything, so her hand was shaking, or that might be connected to what's going on inside her head, because Jackson did tell Clark about that, and Clark's like, are you sure you're okay, Mom? So, side note, just kind of, because it is kind of a serious episode. Obviously, I like the conversation with her and Murphy. She's like, whoa, Murphy, you can cook? He's like, yep. She's like, oh, and you can read, too. He's like, I know what you're thinking, Clark. All the good ones are taken. And it's just like, I just love how much of a smart-ass Murphy is. But, just kind of throw something in there to kind of ease up, like, all this serious talk, because, it's a very serious show. It does have its, like, little small funny moments here and there. But on the other side of the episode, we dealt with Eliot, who was following Octavia, because it's like, hey, you spared my life, so the very least I can do is, like, I owe you. Which she actually brings him along. It's like, when the acid rain came, she could have left him, but, she brought him along. But then when they got into the cave and everything, she's just like, shut up, don't talk to me. And, obviously, Eliot kind of explains why he, the fact is of his home, like, he's afraid to go back because, like, he's going to have all the memories of his family, the family that, obviously, he killed for, when he was under the control of the chips and everything. Which is, like, going back to it, it's understandable why Eliot did what he did. You can't help but be pissed at him, but at the very least, you understand why he did. It wasn't out of some malicious intent. It was, obviously, he didn't know, obviously, as we learned last episode, he didn't know at the time what was going on, but at the same time, it's like, for him, it was like he didn't want a repeat of that particular situation. Just so for him, he was on a kick to be like, oh, granted, you could also argue that's kind of their fault for not telling everyone from the beginning that basically by keeping this secret, it caused a lot of problems. It led to like the Ice Nation wiping. It turned Rowan thinking like, oh, they're totally against me and stuff like that. Which obviously that never popped up in this episode, but I'm sure that's still obviously an issue where it's like everyone's just kind of off on their own. We still don't even know what happened to Indra. Or what's up with her daughter, because her daughter actually still has the flame. I'm curious. When dust is all settled, once again, Rowan asked Clark last episode, like, what is after all of this, when it's all said and done? Like, where do they all stand? Because obviously there's going to have to be something put into place. Because obviously after what the Ice Nation did, killing a lot of Tree Crew people and kind of, doing what they've done, and obviously peace isn't necessarily going to be the easiest thing between anyone, Sky Crew, Tree Crew, any remaining Tree Crew, or Ice Nation. So I am curious to know where that all plays into part, and I assume it has to do with her Indra's daughter, because also, like, the fact is, when it's all said and done, they'll all be Nightblood. So what does that mean going forward? Because obviously Luna was the original Nightblood, so is that going to be a situation where you have Rowan be like, oh, I'm going to keep my crown and try and kill Luna, if not outright kill her, for the sake of trying to keep the power that he's obtained? Questions like that kind of arise. But I literally forgot where I was at when I was thinking about all that. Right. Getting back to it, so it's like understandable why. The point I was getting to was like why Alien did what he did. It was for the sake of not, he didn't know what was going on because no one told him. If everything was a little more upfront from the beginning, then maybe he would. That's the point I was trying to make. Sorry, I just got very long-winded and off on a tangent. It actually happens a lot more than you realize because I tend to kind of cut it out when I kind of lose track of my thoughts like that. But nevertheless, he's up there talking to Octavia, and he's telling Octavia the fact is that basically she tries to hide it. She's been running away from it. Like whatever it is, obviously we know that thing being Lincoln. Lincoln was the catalyst that kind of turned Octavia into who she is, becoming the Sky Ripper. Because for her, she needed to fight, she needed to kill. It was her way of dealing with her pain. It was like the only way she can find herself to push forward and move forward is she needed someone to hate. In this particular case, obviously, for her, it also, I'm sure when Pike died, that was kind of like, the thing is, it didn't make her feel better. I'm sure she thought it would. She's like, oh, I got justice for Lincoln, but it didn't do anything. Like, it didn't heal her broken heart, is what I'm saying. Hating, Bellamy won't fix it either. So, but now it's just a situation where, you have Eliot be like, no, the girl who you were before all this happened, I know she's still in there. She's like, no, she's not. And she starts trying to walk out into the acid rain just because she's mad. It's like the only thing she can do because last episode made her kind of confront why she is the way she is. And it made her confront like Lincoln's death. And the fact is that all she's been doing is trying to run from it rather than facing it. And, Eliot was able to pull her back, but for her, it was just kind of it literally was crossing my mind. I was like, in this episode, when I saw them again, I was like, are we setting this up to be like, kind of like he's kind of the new boyfriend in her life? I was just curious, but I mean, they had their particular situation because she was like, I want to feel anything, just anything at all. And so they did their thing. I was sure it was going to be a situation where she would have been like, yeah, last night meant nothing. It was just kind of a life and death situation, just whatever, which Eliot didn't really react to it much either. I mean, one of them really said anything. He was just like, so I'm going to go back home, essentially. So if you want to follow, it's this way if you want to come. But if you don't want to, that's fine too. Just, whatever. And leaves. But then you have Octavia dropping her blades, kind of representing the fact that she's kind of let go. And so she decides to take Eliot. She's like, okay, I'm going to take you home. So it's like, oh, something's budding there. So it seems like she is letting go in her heart because even if she was mad at Eliot, it's a situation where it's like, she understands why he did what he did. And it was a situation where it's like, I guess she's kind of let go of a lot of her hate. So it does beg the question, what does it mean for her and Bellamy? What does it mean for Bellamy going forward? Because he's like, yeah, you can't save those who don't want to be saved. And it's like, maybe Bellamy's looking himself like that. Maybe Bellamy's like, I'm not worth saving because I don't deserve to be saved. Don't try and save me. So maybe the mentality that Octavia had before, maybe he has that now. But it seems like because they're almost doing a switch. Maybe, granted, we don't know. It just really depends on what goes down next episode. But maybe that's who Bellamy is going to become. And obviously with Octavia, she's becoming more like Bellamy of trying to be like, oh, put it behind her. In Bellamy's case, like I said, it was for redemption for her as kind of letting go of all the hate and pain that she's been holding on to. Maybe the situation isn't necessarily to let it go, but to more so embrace it, and not just embrace it in a way of kind of turning it into a weapon, but embracing it and realizing like you lost someone that you love and it hurt, and, find another reason, another way to kind of go forward. At least that's my thoughts on it. So, but overall, a very good episode, and I'm very interested to see where next week's episode takes us and results of like where everybody stands, because obviously a lot of the Arcadia supplies got diminished because they don't have any, a lot of their water they have is just the water that's left inside. A lot of their supplies were messed up because of the, some of the stuff they had salvaged is messed up from, I think the way Kane was saying it was like a lot of the stuff they had put away that they salvaged from the, explosion to fire is still inside, but it's like even the water and stuff only lasts an amount of time. So obviously this is our first look at the acid rain. So, cause it's not even like the full 2 months. To me, I felt like, cause something was running through my mind. I was like, cause I saw the previews of this episode and I was like, oh, they need testing someone. I was like, to be honest, perfect person testing would be Jasper, cause he'd be okay with it. Cause it's like, hell, there's a chance I might die. Okay, let's do this. So maybe, especially if it's a situation where he's kind of like, oh, giving everyone else a choice to survive. It's like everyone wants to live. So it's like, okay, why not? I don't, how Jasper had that mentality before. But like I say, it seems like he's always flip-flopping on it. So never really able to tell heads or tails where Jasper is. It's interesting. it's sad, but also makes you angry to see how Jasper's character has developed, because he's not the same, obviously the same person he was in the first 2 seasons. I mean, after losing Maya, it changed him. So, but also to see what goes forward. Like, I wonder, will they find out the truth about Emori? Probably not. I don't think they will. That's probably just a secret that she's going to keep with Murphy. So, I mean, like I said, I don't think they would have ever done that to her. Like, I'm sure Rowan would have found somebody else. I mean, you might have had Rowan be like, oh, why not take her? But I'm sure they would have tried to find someone else, just because it's like, I don't think like Clark's that cruel. I think Clark would have been like, either use me, or the fact is, like, she would like, reluctantly say that use someone else, because it's like, you're important to Murphy, so there's no way she would have done that to you, because especially after all of the people that Clark has lost, Finn, Lexa, so it's like, she's not about to destroy someone else's happiness even for the sake of living. I mean, granted, like I said, it's still that area of like, well, maybe if it means helping everyone else in the long run. So yeah, but like I said, good episode. Very interested to see where we go next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.